I'm Nolan Zenker. I'm also a user experience designer. I work with Molly a lot. So just to kind of add to what we do, we look at both the visual design and how the site looks, but we also focus on that experience of getting from the home page of the website all the way to checkout and make sure that's as easy as possible.
When did you first become interested in programming?
For me, I grew up kind of in a programming household a little bit. My dad is a computer programmer at the Mayo Clinic, and then a couple of my brothers are actually now programmers and do a lot with computers. So that's kind of where it started for me. So kind of growing up around that environment led me to be a little bit more curious about it and learn a little bit more.
And just because I know you, can you also tell them what else you're really interested in, that you were what your major was?
Oh, so I actually went to school for art education to be an art teacher, but then also communication design, which is very similar to graphic design. So I actually did not go to school for programming whatsoever.
I'm very different, actually. I didn't really get interested into programming until I was already in college. I went to school for graphic design, and then while I was in school for graphic design, I started to learn some programming and learn some web building skills, and kind of expanded my knowledge from there. But so I was an adult when I learned. So you guys have a really big head start. You guys are doing awesome. So.
Do you both feel like the graphic design, the art piece of it helps you in maybe some different ways than people that like just go in starting off, computers?
I think there's a tie-in with creative problem solving that can go across probably a lot of different areas, but certainly in programming.
Yeah.
And design. So.
Yeah. How did you learn to program?
Okay, so like I said, I did not go to school for programming, and actually when I went to school for graphic design, they never had the web tie-in. At that point, there's a little bit, excuse me, of a pull-in there, but now if you were to go to school for graphic design, they focus a lot more on the web side of it, so you'd learn a little bit more. I actually learned it my first job. I kind of got pushed into it a little bit because one of our other programmers had left, and I said that would be something I'd be interested in because, like I said, when I was younger, I had an interest in it, and I had kind of a little bit of knowledge, but not enough to get going. But I just kind of self-taught myself based on using Google and figuring out how do I do this, and reading through different articles. They didn't quite have the programs that they have now, or the websites that really teach you at that higher level where you guys would be on the code.org. I kind of wish we had that around at the time because it's a lot more, I guess, broken apart than it is getting down deep into the code. So I basically self-taught myself and just kind of grew off learning from others around me.
Same for me. I'm self-taught. I did end up taking a few programming classes later in my college years, but for the most part, I started learning code by finding simple websites and starting to look at the code and try and break them or change them, and that's how I learned. A lot of mistakes along the way, but that's what I found to be the easiest way to learn is play around with the code and break it, because it's not going to hurt anything, and you're going to learn something in the process.
Do you consider your coding ability to be a superpower?
I would say so. I mean, you can go from nothing to having a really cool functioning product. So I would say that that's a pretty big power to create something out of nothing, essentially. Especially if you could see what our engineering team at our job does, that sometimes they come out with something that you didn't know could be done with just code, but then you're happily surprised when they make things work, especially we kind of make their job difficult sometimes because we get to design things to send over to them. So we'll design something that we think, okay, they're gonna come back, there's no way that they can do this, but they use their powers and they make it work, so.
Yep. I guess personally, I don't view my coding ability as a superpower because I'm surrounded by people that are better than me at it. But I think it's great to be surrounded by those people because I'm still learning every day different things that can be done. And that's kind of the cool thing about it is it's an ongoing process. It'll never end. You're always learning, even when you're done with school. So it's an ever-changing market, but it's very cool.
What is the coolest thing you've been able to use your coding powers on? Or, also just what are some cool things you've seen coding able to do?
At a previous job, I used to actually build out websites from start to finish, and that was always kind of cool because you knew that people were actually out there using your website, and you could look at some of the data that comes in when we can see who's using the website, how they're using it, things like that. Especially now in our current position when we're a user experience designer, when we go and make those design changes to help our customers, we actually follow along and see how it helps them, using just different types of data that comes in so we can see if it's actually helping them or not. So that's pretty cool to see that we actually are making a difference.
When I was almost done with school, I got kind of interested in something that doesn't really exist anymore, but we used to make flash games. So a lot of the internet games that you would see, we'd really get into those, and a few buddies of mine and myself would try and come up with quizzes or games where you would have to answer history questions or programming questions to try and get to the end. So that was always the most fun for me, the coolest things I've built with code.
How has learning how to program or code changed how you look at the world?
It's really kind of helped with my critical thinking and just knowing that, I might not find the right solution right away, but I can kind of dig around and trial and error. A lot with code you'll find is it doesn't always work the way you want it the first time, but you don't want to get discouraged. So I will try again, and you just make small changes at a time and keep checking back to see if it's going how you want it to, and I guess you can kind of translate that into other parts of your life too. Just making small changes to get to a bigger change is a little bit how I look at it.
For me, I think it's really improved my creative problem-solving skills, kind of like I said before, with even just everyday life things, whether it's figuring out how we're going to spend our money this month, or figuring out how we're going to track how we're spending our money. Any of the just normal life things, it's kind of helped me come up with creative ways to solve problems and come up with solutions.
What is one important thing kids should think about as they learn to program?
So building off that critical thinking, something with programming that's a little bit different than some of the other subjects you might learn is there's not always just one answer. There's usually several answers that can get you to the same point. So let's say that I code something one way and it works. Nolan might come in there and code it a completely different way using different coding languages, anything, but it can still have the same end product. So that's something always to keep in mind and keep you encouraged is even if you are doing it a little bit differently than somebody else, you can still end up with the same end product or something very similar that works.
The other thing I would add to that is just welcome mistakes. I think they're probably the strongest learning tool when you learn to program is when you make mistakes. That's where you learn the most, and it's a safe environment to make those mistakes because it's not going to hurt anything. So.
Questions from you guys? Anybody have any questions at all? I have a question. Do you always have to work by yourself in your jobs?
No, especially in the work that we do, it kind of goes through a funnel of people. So we get to work with a whole spectrum of people. We get to work with the engineers who are our programmers, and then we also get to work with our analysts who they're also looking through these sites and looking for problems, and they do more of the data side in kind of figuring out what the issue is and how many people are getting stuck, things like that. But we also get to work within our own group, so the user experience designers, we usually get together and try to solve a problem together, because sometimes just one of us looking at a website, I might think something's going to fix it, but I didn't necessarily think of all the factors. So Nolan or one of the other user experience designers might come in and say, hey, did you think about trying this instead? Or what do you think, about trying this?
And how about when it seems like no one in the office can figure it out, what do you guys do?
Does that happen?
You want to go to Sadie?
Yeah, Sadie's really good. I mean, sometimes you're gonna run into issues, but that's where, between teams, that creative problem solving says, well, we can't do it this way, but we can do it this way, and the end result is the same. So it's usually about finding a different route to get to the same answer. And usually with quick discussions, that's usually pretty attainable.
Okay. Anybody have a question that they can think of? All right, you'll also be able to ask questions because they'll be walking around.